Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome to another unscientific review. This time we're talking about the brand new Fujifilm X-T3. I don't even think this camera is actually out yet right now. And this camera is super exciting. If you like features, this thing is jam-packed with features. I think it's actually the first APS-C camera that does 4K 10-bit internally. Very interesting. I've actually never used a Fujifilm camera before, so I was pretty skeptical going into this review. But with features like 4K 10-bit, 4K 60p, 120p log, apparently good color science, all for $1,500, I think it's worth giving it a chance. And before we even get into it, I just want to say this video is not sponsored in any way. This is not even my camera. It's just on loan for a couple weeks, so I'm gonna be as unbiased as possible. I get paid nothing. I got nothing for free. This is just my opinion about this camera so far. First impressions right away when you see this camera is it just looks like a really nice camera. And I'm just talking about, you know, the shell of it. It looks really nice. It's just like a boss camera. If you roll up with this camera to a shoot, people are gonna be like, what is that camera you're using? It looks so legit. It just looks honestly like a legit camera. Not that that matters at all, except for maybe ego, but it's still cool. I appreciate it. And I even like that they have these little dials. It gives it that like kind of analog, cool, old school feel. Even though I found it just easier to use the scroll wheels, but it's still really cool having all these dials. There's just so much going on in this little body already. You got dual card slots if you care about that. I don't know why people care about that so much, but it has it. No flip LCD screen, but it does kind of swivel and tilt. But just please, all camera companies, put in a real flip LCD screen. It's just really handy for all those awkward angles and stuff where you can't really see the screen so well. Okay, but where do we actually start with this camera? I guess the 4K. So this camera does 4K 10-bit internally, and then it can do also 4K 60p, so 60 frames per second. And the 4K is being recorded at a whopping 400 megabits per second. That's a lot of data, a lot of information compared to something like the Sony's. They're only doing 100 megabits per second. Essentially, it's 4 times the quality. I don't know if you can quite compare it like that, but it's a lot more information that you can then use to color grade and all that stuff in post. Yeah, it's really, really impressive. So there's a ton of room for color grading with this camera, the 10-bit, the 400 megabits per second. It's just really impressive, and the image itself looks really nice. I found the dynamic range was super impressive. I actually think it's more than the Sony a7 III that I've been kind of playing around with more. Do not take my word for this at all. This is just kind of an unscientific eye looking at the two different cameras and the footage that's coming out of them. But I feel like the dynamic range is really impressive in the Fujifilm X-T3. I think I read on the Cinema 5D site that it's around 11 point something. So it's doing a really good job. And even in the 120p, yes, this camera can do 120 frames per second. The roll off into the highlights and the information there, it was really impressive. I just think the image coming out of this camera, yeah, it's worth looking at. And downside to all that information and these crazy codecs is that it does bog down Premiere quite a bit. It doesn't play very well at all in Premiere right now. I'm hoping they'll do some sort of updates in Premiere so we can get this going a little bit better. So you're gonna have to probably use proxies or convert to ProRes or something like that if you wanna edit with this codec. So that is something to think about. It's really high quality, but it might bog down your workflow because you can't just play it in Premiere very smoothly. 4K 60 frames per second, even though it's not 10-bit, again, image looks really nice, very impressed with it. And I'm just really happy that all these camera companies are kind of battling it out and just jam-packing these cameras with so many different features. Yeah, 4K 60p. Yeah, not too many cameras have that. And again, 120 frames per second, I think it's doing it at 200 megabits per second, which is again more than the Sony, which would do it at 100 megabits. Not quite as much as the 1DX2, which I think is around 350 megabits, but it's very high quality. While I was color grading it, it really held up well. It wasn't falling apart right away. Even in the log profile, very impressive. And even in a 4K timeline, the 120p footage in 1080 held up really well. And it's probably a lot to do with the 200 megabits per second, but yeah, I was surprised at how good it looks. It doesn't really look like 1080 for some reason. Now, the downside is that there is a bit of a crop in the 120. It's not quite the same APS-C size crop that the camera normally shoots in, but it's not a crazy crop either, so it's not that big of a deal for me. And then moving on to 1080 at 24p, I didn't get to test it out too much. I didn't have too much time yet, but again, it looked really good. I was impressed with it. It almost looks better than 1080, and with the f-log and the dynamic range and the colors, yeah, it's a really impressive image. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's doing it at 10-bit and at 200 megabits per second. So that's a lot of information for 1080. There aren't too many cameras that do these kinds of data rates. And when you think about Fujifilm, you automatically think about colors. They've been making film stocks forever, so that's like the first thing I think about. And I heard a lot about Fujifilm, the colors for their digital cameras also, that it was really nice. And I'm always a little bit skeptical when people say that kind of stuff, but testing it out, I really like the colors coming out of this camera. I mostly filmed in f-log, which is their flat profile, getting the most dynamic range, but then they also have this kind of like film look called Eterna, which was really cool. But for me, I would rather just use the f-log, get all that information, and then we were actually using a LUT from Fujifilm, which converts that f-log into that Eterna color space. So it's kind of like taking that log footage and making it more of a standard saturation and contrast, but still giving it kind of this film look. It's not just a normal Rec 709 look. But I do appreciate the fact that it does have Eterna built in, because if you're on a really tight deadline and you don't have much time to color grade, which log footage can take more time, you can use this color profile, Eterna, and yeah, it looks really great straight out of the camera. But again, I would just rather have more information that I can then play around with in post. So an interesting question that I wanted to answer is, how do the colors compare with something like the 1DX2 and then the Sony a7 III? And I think the results are pretty interesting. So I filmed in log on the Fujifilm and on the Sony. Canon doesn't have a log, so I couldn't film on log, but it's on like a neutral flat profile. And I would say that Canon's colors are maybe still the best out of the three. The reds are a little bit too saturated, I find, so you kind of have to desaturate the reds a lot of the times. But the Fujifilm was right up there. It was almost even more natural for the skin tones. When comparing it to the Sony color science, it's like way better in my opinion. And now, of course, these are all subjective things, but I felt like the Fujifilm's color science was the closest to real life. It was the most accurate representation of what was actually going on in real life. So again, very impressed with this camera. I had heard about the color science, but still, I'm always skeptical, and it definitely proved itself, I would say. And then let's talk about autofocus. Autofocus didn't used to be that big of a thing for me, but nowadays, the more I film myself, and even when I'm using something like a gimbal, I really want good autofocus, because I want to be able to do all these different kinds of cool shots without having to worry about staying the same distance from my subject the whole time, because I can't manual focus while I'm on a gimbal. So autofocus is actually really important for me. So again, I tested the 1DX2, the Sony a7 III, and then the Fujifilm X-T3. And again, very, very interesting results. I'd say Canon was the best with autofocus. They're still the king with autofocus. But I expected the Sony to be a lot better than the Fujifilm. And actually, I think the Fujifilm was better than the Sony, which is really interesting. I was not expecting this at all, because the Sony is pretty good for the most part. But the Fujifilm and all the gimbal shots and everything that I did, and then the stupid little test I did walking back and forth, the Fujifilm was better. So that was an interesting surprise. And then let's talk about low light. I just did a quick little test, and again, the low light wasn't too bad. It's definitely not a low light monster. I think the Sonys are better in this case. But even going something crazy like 12,800 ISO, it wasn't horrendous. It's not good, but it's not horrid either. You could use it if you really needed to, maybe denoise it a little bit. So yeah, it's really interesting. I don't know if sensors are just getting so much better now that they all can do kind of low light in a better way. But yeah, another interesting little surprise from the Fujifilm X-T3. And then very important, let's do a vlogging test. Now, some of you right away are wondering, why the heck is this guy doing a vlogging test? That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Hold on. I get it, you might not be into vlogging, but there are a lot of people who are interested in vlogging. And that's really what I try to do when I'm trying to review cameras like this guy. I want to know, who is this camera for? Who is it actually meant for? Who is it good for? Is it good for wedding shooters? Is it good for vloggers? Is it good for music video making? I want to know, who is this camera good for? Because let's face it, pretty much all the cameras coming out nowadays are like super good, like crazy good. If I would have had this camera for my first camera, man, I'd be a pretty happy camper. So that's why I do things like this, like a vlogging test, which isn't very conventional for a camera review, but it's a great way to figure out who is it for. Also, it's just a good way to test out some of the features, like for example, autofocus. How does it deal with different lighting situations, like that flat lighting situation I had earlier, and now it's a little bit harsher. So yeah, vlogging's a cool way to just test out some different things in the camera, because you're really putting it to real world use, and there are different kinds of uses in vlogging than you are with, let's say, shooting a music video. So yeah, it's interesting. Oh, and if you're interested, which you probably are, everything so far has been filmed on this lens, the Fujifilm 16-55 f2.8. Great lens. Yeah, all right, let's get back to the office, but let's not get hit by a car. All right, so vlogging test complete. I hope you're okay with me doing a vlogging test. I found it to be pretty good actually for vlogging. It was holding focus really well, even in more challenging conditions. The color science was great. It's really easy to color grade just using the Eterna LUT. It's a really good place to start. And overall, I liked using it. I didn't vlog with it for too long, but I liked using it. And that to me is really important, is how does it actually feel using it? When you're taking it out in the field, are you struggling with the camera the whole time, or is it pretty simple to use? Now, okay, I know I've been talking this camera up a lot. There's a lot of things that surprised me about it, but give me the downsides. What are the things that I found weren't so good? Well, first off, the flip LCD screen. There's no flip LCD screen. I don't want these little swivel screen things. Now, this one does go like sideways like that, but honestly, who needs that kind of swivel? I want it to flip out, be able to turn any direction. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of the LCD screen. And then probably one of the biggest things that people are gonna be mad about is that there's no IBIS. There's no in-body stabilization. And that was definitely apparent when I was vlogging. Because it is an APS-C size sensor, I can't go super wide, which kind of takes away some of that shake. You're gonna get that shake because there's no stabilization. There's no even electronic stabilization, which is a shame. I wish it had something like that, even if it doesn't have actual in-body stabilization. But I did some handheld tests, and they weren't that bad. You could still use handheld footage, especially if you're doing 120p or 60p. It kind of hides a lot of that shake. But yeah, it sucks not having IBIS. I actually really like IBIS. The base ISO is fairly high, so it starts at 640, so you can't go any lower than that. So again, in a really bright situation, you're gonna need a lot of ND if you want to shoot wide open. So that can be a little tricky, but it's not the end of the world. And then for me, I think the biggest downside is that it's not full frame. Full frame is a really nice look that I really enjoy. I like vlogging with full frame. I like my cinematic B-roll with full frame. So I've kind of gotten used to the full frame look. So for me, that's a downside. But for a lot of other people, it actually doesn't matter that much, or they might even prefer it. It's more of a personal preference, I think, than a negative or positive. But just for me, I would rather have full frame. But man, 4K 10-bit, 4K 60p, 120p, F-Log, great color science, autofocus works really well, and all for $1,500. It's hard to not recommend this camera. And that's really the question, is who is this camera for? That's kind of what I try to figure out every time. And I would say this is a really versatile camera. I was trying to figure out which kind of category does it fit in. But I think it works great for kind of indie shooters. If you're filming weddings, great color science is great for weddings. F-Log, having a lot of dynamic range, great for weddings. Music videos, if you're filming music videos or any of that kind of really creative stuff, again, having great color science and 60p and 120p and all those different codecs, huge advantages there. corporate videos I could even see this for. Vlogging, I could actually see this being a vlogging camera, even though you can't see yourself. That's a big downside. It still worked really well, and especially if you just want to vlog in 1080, the 1080 codec seems really strong, so I might even try this for vlogging. But it's a very versatile camera, so I don't really know what category to put this in. I would just say try it out, see if you like it. For $1,500, it doesn't get much better than this camera right now. I'm kind of speechless right now. I was not expecting so much out of this little guy, especially because I've never used Fujifilm. I was really skeptical, but yeah, this is a camera to keep your eye on. I would say this camera will be much more popular than I would have ever thought. But as always, if you're interested in this camera, test it out for yourself, figure out, does it work for your filmmaking style? And yeah, I'd love to know your opinion on this camera. Leave a comment down below. What things do you like about it? What things don't you like about it? Yeah, I'm really curious to know what you guys think. I guess that's it for this review. I feel like this is gonna be a really long video. There's just so much to talk about, but I really wanted to talk about all the cool features in the Fujifilm X-T3. So if you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and yeah, leave your thoughts below and go and test out the Fujifilm X-T3. I want to hear what you guys think about this camera. All right, that's it for this one. I'll see you guys later. Bye.